It's time for Security Now, episode 249. Steve Gibson will answer 9 great questions, including our glitch of the week and some security news and errata, too. It's all coming up with episode 249 of Security Now next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Audio bandwidth for Security Now is provided by AOL Music and Spinner.com, where you can get free MP3s, exclusive interviews, and more. Video bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 249, recorded May 20th, 2010. Your questions, Steve's answers, number 92. Security Now is brought to you by GoToMeeting. Business travel can kill your company's profits, so do more, save more, and travel less with GoToMeeting. For your free 30-day trial, visit gotomeeting.com/securitynow. And by Carbonite, the leader in online backup. Back up your PC or Mac off-site securely and automatically. For a free trial offer, plus 2 free months with purchase, go to Carbonite.com. Offer code SecurityNow. It's time for Security Now, the show that covers your security now. And privacy, too, with the guru of security, the man who started GRC.com, the Gibson Research Corporation, originally as a way to sell his one and only software product, Spinrite, but it's become a huge resource for anybody interested in security between the podcasts, of which there are now 249, but also the software that he gives away. The man who discovered the first spyware, wrote the first anti-spyware program, even coined the term spyware, Steve Gibson. It's great to see you again.
Well, Leo, we set a pretty high bar for ourselves last week.
I should add to your credits, the man who created the portable dog. I don't want to say killer because no dogs were harmed.
No dogs were harmed. And it's unfortunate that that's what, when I was 16 years old, that's what I named the thing. And I considered, fudging that for our audience and calling it the portable dog trainer. But I thought, well, maybe I'll be forgiven and understood that, I was 16. But
we should call it the portable principal stunner.
Vice Principal Archibald.
Yeah. Have you heard from Vice Principal Archibald? Because I
actually wondered maybe if it would filter out to him. Haven't heard anything from him as a result of this. It could happen. He's probably still alive and kicking somewhere.
If you have not listened to episode 248 of Security Now, you may pause this one and go back and listen. Not that you'll need to for anything we talk about today, but it's just such a fun episode. And with an important moral, which is that you've got to encourage kids to create, to make, not to sit passively and consume, but to create. And thank goodness we live in an era where the tools for creation, whether it's software programming, hardware hacking, are just everywhere. We've got a listener in the studio. Doc is in town for the Maker Faire, which is coming up this weekend in San Mateo, California, which is all about people making cool stuff. And I think that movement is alive and well.
It's interesting, too. I mean, the fact that there is such a thing as a Maker Faire, that they're scattered around the country, that there's a magazine, Make, that supports it. I mean, that sort of says that there's something special about making stuff.
Yes.
I mean, it's not nothing.
Yes.
So I decided that we really needed to do a Q&A. So, because it'd been now several weeks since we've heard questions from our listeners, the mailbag incoming is full of really good stuff. So I didn't want to skip that, which was regularly scheduled for last week, which we did the special episode 248, sort of in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the invention of the laser. So I thought, okay, well, we'll change the parity of our Q&A and non-Q&A episodes by not skipping one, but just pushing it down a bit. So that's what we have for today is 9 questions, some short, some long, some discussion, tons of security-related stuff to talk about. So I think we've got a really great podcast to follow. It's okay. Nothing will be as great as 248, but we'll do the best we can.
It will be content-rich, and it will cover security this time, which
Indeed.
is So let's start with the security updates, and we'll get. Well, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to get a commercial in now.
Yep.
We have 2 today, and I'll get one in now, and we'll get one in then before your Q&A begins, because we do want to really make sure that you hear the commercials, because that's what makes this possible. That's what pays for all the gear, the equipment, the staff. Gets Steve a little check every week.
The ever-growing staff.
The ever-growing, yeah. We just hired Sarah Lane is now joining us. Tom Merritt joins us June 1st. Colleen has left. She went to Google. I'm very proud of her for that. But Ken Shepardson has joined us as our VP Engineering. We for a long time, John Slanina, Jammer B, has been here on the weekends helping me out for literally a stipend. We've hired him. He's gone on staff as our studio manager. So we have, yeah, you're right. Maybe I better do 2 commercials. No, we'll never do more than 1.5 an hour. That's my pledge to you. But I do want to mention our great friends at Citrix, who have really, I think they represent more than half of our operating budget. They do such a great product. We're really happy to have them on the show, and they wanted us to mention GoToMeeting today, and I'm glad to do it. Business travel, as you well know, is not merely stressful and time-consuming, is expensive. We have to be very careful about the business travel we do, but we use GoToMeeting all the time, especially now that they have an free iPad application. Means I can meet anywhere I can get internet access. They've got VoIP built in, so I just plug in a headset, and I'm heard, I'm listening to the meeting, and I'm watching it on my iPad. That is so cool. Save time, save money. Don't break your bank traveling around meeting clients and colleagues. Yes, sometimes you need to press the flesh, but a lot of times you can use GoToMeeting and hold those meetings online. And I'll tell you, a GoToMeeting meeting is very engaging for sales presentations, product demos, for training sessions, collaborating on documents, any kind of conference call. It just brings it to life. It makes it more visual. Now, you don't need an iPad to use it. Of course, it works on Windows. It works on Macs. It works anywhere you can get online. All you have to do if you want to hold a meeting is you can, while you're on the phone, send out a link, or if you're in email, before the meeting, you send out a special email that says you're invited to this meeting. Click this link. Even if the client doesn't have GoToMeeting installed, and this is really important, you'll be able to put that, get them on that meeting within a few seconds. They just click the link. It's just a little tiny bit of, I think it's Java code that downloads, and boom, now they're seeing your screen. They're seeing your PowerPoint or Keynote presentation. They're seeing the spreadsheets and the slides. They're engaged. They're with you. You're on the same page. And you didn't have to spend all that money to travel. GoToMeeting is very affordable. I think it's $49 a month for unlimited meetings as long as you want, as often as you want. Compare that to one business trip, and even a business trip across town, it costs more than that, especially if you buy the guy lunch. You don't have to buy him lunch with GoToMeeting. Try it free for the next 30 days. You'll see what I mean. GoToMeeting.com/securitynow. GoToMeeting.com/securitynow. Thank you, Citrix and GoToMeeting, for your support for Security Now. They make all the dog stories possible. So, item 1 in our security news.
Adobe, speaking of dog stories, Adobe in the dog house.
Again?
Once again.
This sounds like a broken record at this point.
Well, I would say it's shocking, but the problem is with Shockwave. The good news is...
That's not widely used, really, is it?
Exactly. That's the good news, is that it is sort of their more powerful platform. It's more expensive to develop for. You need about $1,000 designer program in order to create it. There aren't lots of third-party. In fact, there may not be any third-party support for like alternative design platforms. So once again, this is a problem with Adobe Shockwave, not Flash. Now, last time we had major problems with Shockwave, my advice to our listeners was just uninstall it. Right. If you happen to have installed it by mistake or sometime in the past, it's likely that you don't need it. So hopefully you'll know if you do need it. Certainly, a given corporation might have standardized on it. It might be something you have no choice to use. In any event, you could certainly upgrade to the latest.
Am I reading this right? There are 11 problems?
Yes, and I wanted to just run through these to give our listeners a sense of how relatively horrifying these are. SANS put together in their most recent security vulnerability alert a sort of a summary. This is available on Adobe's site. It's available from the third-party site, but I wanted to just quote from what SANS wrote because they sort of turned it into English in a nice fashion. The first issue is caused by a boundary error while processing Shockwave 3D block, which is one of the block formats in a Shockwave file. The second issue is a memory corruption vulnerability caused by a signedness error while processing malicious Shockwave files. The third issue is a memory corruption vulnerability caused by an array indexing error while processing malicious Shockwave files. The fourth issue is caused by an integer overflow error while processing malicious Shockwave files. The fifth issue is a memory corruption vulnerability caused by an error while processing asset entries. The sixth issue is caused by a buffer overflow error while processing embedded fonts. The seventh problem is caused by a boundary error while parsing director files. The eighth problem is a memory corruption vulnerability caused by an error while processing 4-byte field with a 4-byte field within record type FFFFF49 within the 3D objects defined inside director files. The ninth issue is caused when an application encounters signed values while parsing PAMI RIFF RIFF chunks.
PAMI RIFF?
Oh, you know her?
Oh, yeah. Went to high school with her, I think.
The 10th issue is caused by an error while processing director files during a memory dereference. We know about what memory dereferences are now from talking about pointers in our Fundamentals of Computer Technology series. The 11th issue is caused by a signedness error while processing director files. And as if that wasn't enough, there are more unspecified errors which can be exploited to cause memory corruption. In other words, just don't use this.
It's stunning that there are this many errors. I don't understand.
I know.
And these are they kind of related, or it seems like they're all different?
They're all
parts
very
of the code.
They're all very different. At the bottom of Adobe's page announcing the update past this vulnerable and prior on both Windows and Mac, by the way, they have a list of thanks to all the various people that have brought these to their attention. So, in fairness, these have been accumulating.
It's a roll-up. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
These have been accumulating for a while from various sources. So this is their fix. So these vulnerabilities exist in version 11.5.6.606. Now, what's important is that this is not Flash. This is Shockwave. So the problem is there's some, and we've talked about this before, some jargon confusion because, for example, my Flash plugins in both Firefox and IE describe themselves as Shockwave Flash. So that's not the problem. And those are back at version 10 something. If it just says Shockwave or Shockwave Player, then that's what you're looking for. But I wanted to also remind our listeners of a cool service that Mozilla is now offering, but also a major news announcement about that. Mozilla has something that we've talked about before called the plugin check for Firefox, where if you simply, in Firefox, you go to mozilla.com/plugin check, all run together, PLUGINCHECK, and you do need to, from a scripting standpoint, trust Mozilla.com. So if you're using NoScript, you need to enable that. That's why it didn't work for me initially until I said, oh, yeah, I got to turn scripting on. Then it worked. And it's just a beautiful facility they're offering to enumerate the plugins in Firefox and tell you how you're doing. Well, when I did that this morning in prepping this, I realized, oh, I was fine, except I needed to update my Acrobat Reader plugin, which I did, and then everything was okay. The big news is they've decided to expand this service beyond Firefox, which is so cool. They're now offering it for not only Firefox, but Safari, Chrome, Opera, and IE.
Wow.
Yes. So Safari users, Chrome users, and IE, you can use, if you go, for example, and I did it this morning when I ran across this, you go to, using IE, you go to mozilla.com/plugin check. It works. It works in Internet Explorer, and it's a little less extensive.
So Great.
Isn't this neat? It's a little bit less extensive in IE, and they explain that the reason is that IE's technology requires much more work from them, sort of individual customization per plugin. So their support under IE is lagging behind what they're able to offer the other browsers. But I just think, hats off to the Mozilla group for doing this. Really, they could easily be snarky and say, we're not going to help anybody else because those browsers are competing with Firefox, obviously. But they're not. They're saying, look, this stuff matters. Plugins are hurting the web in general. And so since we acquire the technology and the knowledge, we're going to make it available cross-browser, which is way cool. So, this is a major tip for today is mozilla.com/plugin check no matter what browser you're using.
And I, thanks to it, found out that my Shockwave is out of date.
Yeah.
Wow. Maybe I'll just uninstall. When you download the Shockwave installer, you get an uninstaller as well. This might be a good time to run the uninstaller.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could keep it. You could certainly keep it around and put it back in if you find out you need it.
Right. Maybe you play Shockwave games or something like that. But
right. So if you do need it, you want to keep it current. But it makes no sense at all to have a vulnerable plugin that you never use. That is, something may have said you need it 3 years ago, and inertia has left it in. Another nice security feature of what we could dream about would be if things realized they hadn't been used for a long time, they'd pop up and volunteer to leave.
Right.
Of course, we're not going to see that anytime soon. But so we need to be proactive. And I would say if you've got Shockwave and you don't know why, uninstall it, because this is from Adobe, and unfortunately, that's not good news.
Somebody in the chat room asked a good question. I don't know if you have an answer. If user access control, the UAC in Windows will protect you against stuff like that. My sense is it would not, because
it will not.
You've already given permission to the browser to run.
Yes, in fact, someone asked also. I think it was a piece of mail that I scanned through and didn't quite make the cut for today. Would a firewall prevent plugins from misbehaving?
Right.
And again, a firewall won't, because the plugin is running in process. It's running in the browser's process. And we talked about also in our Fundamentals of Computing in the Multiverse episode a couple of weeks ago how, what processes are. And these process boundaries are regarded as sort of autonomous units by things like firewalls. So when you have permitted Firefox, for example, or IE or whatever your browser is, to access the internet, as you virtually have to. That's what the thing's for. You've given the browser permission to communicate to the internet. Implicitly, you've given all of its plugins permission to do the same thing. So unfortunately, your control for plugins is within the browser. I didn't mean to really say unfortunately. The fact is, you can manage plugins easily under add-ons and plugins under Firefox. The same thing for IE. You can go through IE and look at all the paraphernalia that your Internet Explorer has collected over time, and just say, I don't know what this is. I think I'm going to disable it, and until I think I need it again.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disappear on you. I was just thinking.
Okay. Yeah. I was also catching my breath because we talked just last week or the week before about a critical problem in Safari regarding the way it Safari for Windows, the way it handled pop-ups. And there was a means had come up that allowed pop-ups to be abused. Well, we've got another two problems in Safari, which are so new that Apple has neither acknowledged nor responded to them.
Oh boy. Yet
there are technical details publicly available for the first of these. So we are currently at 4.0.5 of Safari. And unfortunately, that version, the most recent version from Apple, has two problems. The first is caused by, and we've talked about this before also, a use after free error in the way Apple's Safari for Windows handles references to Windows objects after releasing them, such that a specially crafted web page can be used to trigger this vulnerability, and a successful exploitation of it might lead to remote code execution. And again, technical details for this are available publicly. So Safari doesn't, as we know, doesn't have a large market share. But the danger
on Windows,
is
on
Windows, exactly, on Windows. But the danger is that someone might know that a corporation or a group or a company or a user is a Safari user, and then do a so-called, a directed attack,
spear phishing.
I jumped over that because there was a different term that we used recently. Because it might not be a phishing attack.
Right, it's not an email necessarily. Yeah,
I'm blanking now on what the term was, but we had a new term of art that we'd started using that was like
targeted hacks, targeted exploits.
There was a better word for it. Anyway, it'll occur to us or someone in the chat room. We'll let you know what it was.
Yeah.
And the second is an information
weaponized email.
Weaponized email.
Yeah. Thank you to Window Washer, who was the first to get that one.
Yep. So someone could send you, if they knew you were using Safari, a piece of weaponized email.
That's nasty sounding.
That could take you down. So the second issue is an information disclosure problem with the way Safari handles HTTP authentication credentials in an HTTP request that can cause some information to leak out of your computer. So not such a big deal to worry about as remote code execution, but still, hopefully Apple will jump on this and bring us up to 4.0.6, which will let people know when that happens. In the meantime, there's no fixes available for these, so be careful if you're a Safari user.
On Windows.
Now, yes. And by the way, I just wanted to mention that I've realized often we're talking about security updates and other times we're talking about security news. I had previously been sort of merging them together, and I've decided I'm going to sort of break that out since they are separate issues. So that's all of our update stuff. Now in the news, there was a truly horrifying revelation which occurred recently. This is some security researchers at UC San Diego and also University of Washington have recently delivered a report. So recently I don't have it yet, but they did release some news about their results hacking car control systems. And the only way I can do this justice is to read this story, which was covered many places, and in this instance, it's from the BBC, the news.bbc.com. Says an investigation by security researchers found the systems to be fragile. That is, the control systems in cars to be fragile and easily subverted. The researchers showed how to kill a car engine remotely, turn off the brakes so the car would not stop, and make instruments give false readings. Despite their success, the team said it would be hard for malicious attackers to reproduce their work. So I want to make sure that everybody heard that. But this is my concern is what this foretells, and we'll talk about that once I'm through reading the story. It says the term of researchers led by Professor Stephen Savage from the University of California, San Diego, and Tadashi Kono from the University of Washington set out to see what resilience cars had to an attack on their control systems. Quote, our findings suggest that, unfortunately, the answer is little, wrote the researchers from the Center of Automotive Embedded System Security. The researchers concentrated their attacks on the electronic control units, ECUs, scattered throughout modern vehicles, which oversee the workings of many car components. It is thought that modern vehicles have about 100 megabytes of binary code spread across up to 70 ECUs. So 100 meg of code scattered across as many as 70 different electronic control units. Individual control units typically oversee one subsystem, but ECUs communicate so that many different systems can be controlled as the situation demands. For instance, in a crash, seatbelts may be pre-tensioned, doors unlocked, and airbags deployed. So there's a reason for these systems to intercommunicate, is the point they're making. The attackers created software called CarShark to monitor communications between the ECUs and insert fake packets of data to carry out attacks. The team got at the ECUs via the communications ports fitted as standard on most cars that enable mechanics to gather data without a vehicle, data gathered to gather data about a vehicle before they began servicing or repair work. The researchers mounted a series of attacks against a stationary and moving vehicle to see how much of the car could fall under their control. Quote, "We were able to forcibly and completely disengage the brakes while driving, making it difficult for the driver to stop," wrote the researchers. Conversely, we are able to forcibly activate the brakes, lurching the driver forward and causing the car to stop suddenly. In one attack, the team transformed the instrument panel into a clock that counted down to 0 from 60 seconds. In the final seconds, the horn honks, and as 0 is reached, the car engine shuts off and the doors are locked. They found that almost every system in the car, including engine, brakes, heating and cooling, lights, instrument panel, radio, and locks, was vulnerable. The team concluded that car control software was fragile and easy to subvert. In some cases, simply sending malformed packets of data rather than specific control codes was enough to trigger a response. The team are presenting a paper on their research and on their results at the IEEE Symposium on Security and Privacy in California on the 19th of May, which is the day before we're recording. This is yesterday for Wednesday, because we're recording this episode on Thursday this week, because, as you know, Paul and I swapped.
Yes, which is very kind of you. Thank you. And I should say very kind of Elaine. I apologize to Elaine. Her transcriptionist who has to work twice as fast today. Sorry.
So they said cars benefit from the fact that they are hopefully, and they put hopefully in their paragraph, not connected to the internet parens yet, and currently are not able to be remotely accessed, said Rick Ferguson, a security analyst at Trend Micro. So in order to carry out a successful attack, you would already need to have physical access. You would currently need to have physical access to the vehicle. As a break-in or as a mechanic seem the two most likely scenarios today. As cars and everything else in life, up to and including even pacemakers or refrigerators, become steadily more connected and externally accessible, research such as this should be taken increasingly seriously by manufacturers, he added. Quote, "This represents an opportunity to head off a problem before it starts in the not-too-distant future, as it may result in a real risk to life," and which is why I felt it was really important to share this. I mean, our listeners already know how terrifying this news is, because there's this tremendous drive to add features to our technology. And we know that there's XM radio now, in autos that is sending data so that we're able to listen in our cars. There's beginning to be technology that lets you check on your car. I know there's some web-based stuff that allows you to have some sort of interface with your car in some situations. So, unfortunately, I hope that the people who are building these systems are listening to Security Now, and they're being insistent enough with their management about the kind of safeguards that need to be put in place. It's already dispiriting to learn that it's possible to have, I mean, we know the problems that Toyota has been having with their brakes, and presumably this is buggy code, but here we see that it's possible for, in a research environment, for just accessing through the access ports that mechanics use, that it's possible to deliberately cause a car's brakes to be disengaged so that the foot pedal no longer engages the calipers on the discs. Well, I mean,
so that's a hack, but we should emphasize you need physical access to that port. You have to get in the car and reprogram it.
Well, we should emphasize what we know, which is what the researchers did have physical access. Right. So yes, right. I don't want to scare anyone away from driving.
Nobody's going to be pointing something at you, a ray gun at a portable dog killer at you, a brake killer at you as you drive by. You have to get in the car. That access port's usually right under the steering wheel on all modern cars, and they have to plug into it. At least that's the hack that they were doing.
Yes, themselves. And so the concern, again, I don't want to over alarm anyone, but Leo, we know where these things go. I mean, it's funny because as I'm reading about them talking about a malformed packet, it's like, wow, that's what we had with routers 10 years ago.
It's software. Software's hackable often.
Yes, and unfortunately, when we hear that there's 100 megabytes of code, it's like, okay, you know, I'm going to keep my current car running as long as I can, just because I like the 9-year-old technology I have in it.
You have a what is the date that these things became common? It's been a while.
Well, yes, it is. I mean, I have a 2001 car, so it's 9 years old.
And it doesn't have the port.
Oh, I think it does.
Yeah, I think 98 is when they start putting those ports in.
I think it does. I mean, I think that's what they check.
96,
But again, what happens is, as we've seen before, it's like, oh, these ports are nice. These ECUs are handy. Let's put them, in the seatbelt. Let's put them 70 of them apparently scattered around now in many cars. All little nodes. I mean, it's like the Borg. Right. Little nodes communicating with each other. And it's like, again, I wish there weren't. Okay, first of all, what would be the motivation? It's difficult to see the motivation, and motivation does matter because we know that people are hacking. We know that bad guys hidden through anonymity on the internet are hacking people's computers to get their credit card numbers and identity and authentication information in order to ultimately somehow to make money, to steal money, to or send spam or something. So I hope there isn't motivation for this kind of auto hacking. Frankly, Leo, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that it's possible today, because that's the way these things are. The level of complexity that these vehicles have obviously now achieved, to me, makes them seem, as these researchers said, extremely fragile.
Yeah.
And that's just not good news.
Right.
So, we'll hold our breath. I just, as we've seen also, it takes motivation. And so we'll hope there isn't, nefarious motivation.
This will be something on Law and Order. I mean, it's a way to murder somebody.
Yes.
Yes. But I mean, I remember North by Northwest, they got Cary Grant drunk and they disconnected his brakes and they sent him down a road. So that was 50 years ago. I mean, they had to cut the brake or let the brake fluid out. But if you have physical access to a car, you can.
Well, yes,
make
you can
it
do
dangerous.
Anything. Yes.
And that's true in hacking too. That a lot of times we hear about exploits that require physical access to the computer. My philosophy has always been, if somebody has physical access, you're screwed.
And my point is, physical today, non-physical tomorrow.
Right, because it's software.
Well, and because there's a tremendous desire for connectivity. I mean,
that's the issue. Because right now you can't get into a car remotely because it's not online. It's not. It's not. I mean,
well, we hear about OnStar. And, oh, sir, we know you've been in an accident. We're going to deploy the 911.
I talked with Ford about this, as a matter of fact, the CEO of Alan Mullally of Ford about this, and they make very sure to separate the entertainment computer from the car computer, and that there is not merely a firewall, but there are not connected systems.
Good.
So because of that, right? You don't. If you're going to open connectivity, and they really are increasing it, you cannot allow that connected computer to speak to the car computer. That would be dangerous.
Yeah, well, and we heard same good intention with the high security government networks that were going to be not connected to the internet, but they ended up somehow being connected to the internet, and
of course,
that
somebody's
caused
pointing out that the OnStar system can disable the car. The OnStar operator can disable the car. That would seem to me
that's what I'm saying.
Kind of an issue. I don't know how, and I think there are rules about can they do it when it's running, et cetera, et cetera.
I know. And where did they get their security certificates? Who signed them? And, and has that been spoofed? I mean, you put together a blended attack, and it's like, oh boy, this stuff relies on infrastructure that the designers assume is robust, and then elsewhere the security community goes, oh, that's not quite as strong as we thought it was. And then somebody with the motivation, again, it takes motivation, and I just don't want to have any motivation. Yeah. But, unfortunately, this is, I hate being wrong. I hate being right about this kind of thing, but, it's really cute. It's really deeply creeps me out.
Yeah. Now you got a good point.
Yeah. Now, Google and Wi-Fi.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. First I learned of this was when a journalist with Reuters called and said, Steve, have you heard about the Google admission that they were promiscuously, well, actually, that's my word. I explained to him what promiscuous mode was on a Wi-Fi radio, that they were capturing publicly available data and storing it, recording it on hard drives. And I was quickly brought up to speed and, talked to him about what I thought this meant. So for those of our listeners who may not have heard the story, it's been making big news almost for a week now, because it was last Friday that I talked to this reporter. Google in their Street View technology, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago relative to my realization with my iPad that the Skyhook service, which Apple apparently uses, was able to capture SSIDs and MAC addresses from Wi-Fi hotspots as they were driving around with GPS, mapping where all these things were. And I thought it was very cool that this was available even in encrypted networks, because the SSID and the MAC address are available in the clear.
Has to be in the packet or it won't work.
Correct. So what we found out was that I believe it was Germany that was pressing Google, because the Germans were very upset, just sort of felt a little creepy from a privacy standpoint, were apparently really pressing Google for exactly what data it was that they were capturing. And that forced an admission from Google that, whoops, well, we didn't really intend to, we didn't mean to, we didn't want to, but it turns out that despite all of those disclaimers, we were capturing the payloads of the Wi-Fi data that our Street View cars encountered as they were roaming around Germany, and storing them on disk drives, and we have all that. So the reporter from Reuters said, Steve, what does that mean? And I said, well, it's funny you should ask, because we've talked about this issue a lot on Security Now, the podcast I do with Leo Laporte. I explained that, well, that could be the websites people were visiting, the email that they were transacting. Very often, if they're using a POP or IMAP protocols, that is not web-based mail typically, but superficial sort of earlier protocols, their username and password would be in the clear. Not super sensitive stuff, which is generally deliberately encrypted by, their connection, if not, and in this case, not by the Wi-Fi network. I said, but radio is radio. It's being broadcast. This stuff is in the clear. Now, I did hear in part of Google's explanation for how this happened, a plausible source of like code. Apparently, some other researcher doing something else years before had written some code that did do promiscuous capture. That is to say, it simply sucked in everything that a Wi-Fi radio could receive and stored it. And when years later, a different group who were doing the Street View project said they kind of looked around Google's massive, project and software repository. It's like, oh, look, over here is some code that we could use that somebody wrote before. So they just kind of grabbed it into sort of typical open source mode and dropped it in to their technology for Street View and saved themselves reinventing the wheel. Now, what this code did was record all the payloads of all the packets, rather than only what they really needed. As we've discussed before, what they really needed was the beacon's SSID, the hotspot's SSID, and the MAC address with, tagged with the current GPS coordinates and presumably the signal strength. Because, if I were doing this, I would incorporate signal strength in so that as the car was moving, you'd get a sense for, you could actually do very good triangulation over time to get a sense for the physical location of this node whose SSID and MAC address you've acquired by looking at the signal strength, as the car drives around. So I think the problem is that hard drives are huge. I mean, and Lord knows Google must have some sort of serious quantity discount they get on buying hard drives with, indexing and caching the internet and Gmail that apparently has endless storage and so forth. Google's probably got more storage than anything else on the planet. So hard drives don't cost much. They probably weren't worried about saving hard drive space. So they were probably recording packets and maybe tagging it with this extra metadata, SSID, MAC address. Well, actually, that would be part of the packet. So, and like the GPS information, and maybe just who knows? I haven't looked at in detail at their Street View technology, but sure, they could be doing all of this processing in the vehicle as it drives around, or they could just massively suck all this in. Yes.
I bet you that's what they were doing, and then that would explain it. Yeah.
Yes, that's my guess, is that they had a relatively brain-dead, massive capture operation where they were just sucking this stuff in, tagging the packets with the GPS metadata, and then offline, or off the street, rather, like back at headquarters, then they would reprocess the data in and do all the computations necessary to, geolocate the specific MAC address and SSID node. That makes sense. So they didn't have to do it that way, but that was probably the path of least resistance, which it makes sense they would do. So, I guess my overarching feeling is, hey, the best thing about this is it serves as a wake-up call about unencrypted Wi-Fi. And in other news, and I can't remember whether I mentioned this, whether we had a Q&A, I think we actually do, somebody mentioning a recent judgment by the German government about unencrypted Wi-Fi. But to me, this helps raise awareness of the relative exposure that people have not having their wireless networks encrypted. When we talked about it all the time.
Now, it's fragmentary data they got. They probably got nothing of value.
True. They would have, and see, then that's just it. Germany's freaking out over this.
Right.
And my sense is, first of all, I really believe that this wasn't deliberate.
No.
I can see how they would have followed a path that would have allowed them to capture this due to what they explain. It's entirely plausible to me. I mean, and why would they care? I mean, they've got as much data as they could ever ask for. Just being Google.
Right.
They don't need to drive around and suck up random packets that are unencrypted as they're driving by. It's not like they set up permanent listening posts and we're sucking this in. So yes, I think it's on one hand much to do about nothing. Their explanation makes sense, but I do hope it serves as a bit of a wake up.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you still have an unencrypted, the point in a way is, these people are broadcasting that stuff anyway. It's out there. All Google did was the same thing you do when you listen to a radio station. It's being broadcast.
Yes.
So you really ought to not broadcast. Is the message.
It's radio, and if your keystrokes and your username and password, the sites you're visiting are available. Well, I hope that the story serves to raise awareness of this, that Google doesn't get tainted because of what they did. I mean, yes, they could have arranged not to store this data, but
they have now, by the way, and they deleted it all. And
yes, and they've got a gazillion, trillion terabytes of data. So what's a little more?
Right.
Just
Right.
Okay.
This is a bad one here. This one.
Yes.
This one is really creepy.
Yes, it is. And it turns out this is not the only such site. There's a site called pastit.net, paste-it.net. And so if you use Google to do a site-specific search.
Oh, I know where you're going with this one. I didn't see this in your notes. This is really interesting. Yes.
And so for example, if you put google.com/search ? And then Q equals site:/paste-it.net, then the +sign Visa. Or you can just go to the google.com, click advanced search, specify the site.
You don't even have to do that. If you just do site:, it'll work even in just a standard Google search.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Site:/paste-it.net, Visa will give you this result.
Yes. Now,
I know where you're going with this too.
Yeah, well, yes. And in fact, Leo, if you do that, you click on the first link. It's safe. You will see a page full of people's credit card information, real people, their names, their addresses,
What the heck is this?
Their CVV2. This is a site that the bad guys use for buying and selling credit card information. It is a site that designed to allow people to paste information, then they get a unique URL, and unfortunately Google indexes it.
And I love it that they have Google ads on the right for Capital One Visa cards.
Oh.
That's nice.
Yeah. I mean, this is literally, look at it. It's actual credit card information.
Yeah.
There they are.
Yeah.
With their CVV2 code and the name and
this is terrible.
The street address. I mean, it's horrifying.
If you do the same thing with SSH, people are publishing their SSH keys in this too. This is a fun search to do with a lot of things.
I know.
Wow. So the bad guys, because it's not like an individual user put his card in there. This is a list of hundreds.
Oh, it's hundreds, and those links. I mean, when you do the Google search, you can sort of see what the dates are. There's some that are fresh.
Right.
So what happens is from packet capture, just like we've been talking about, or from malware, some guy running a botnet collects all these,
and he gets
a buyer. Well, he gets a buyer for it, and he uses a site like pastit.net,
right? Because it's anonymous,
as his anonymous intermediary.
Yeah.
So he drops all that stuff there, then gets a unique link, which he gets payment from his buyer, sends the buyer the link, the buyer clicks on the link, brings it up, copies the page, and here's a whole ton of recently captured, fully, all the information you want in order to charge people's credit cards maliciously. So just thought I would share that little bit of happy news with our listeners.
One way this could be solved is if the folks at Paste It would use robots.txt to say, don't index this stuff.
Yes, that would be a help. Now, see, or maybe do, well, I mean, if this is a problem that we've got anonymous drop sites like this, so I guess there are good.
Well, they're
purposes.
very useful. I mean, I use them all the time to share code or whatever. So that's fine. And then there's Drop.io, which I use, drop.io, which I use, but they should absolutely block Google indexing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So, VeriSign has sold its authentication services to Symantec.
Oh, how
Just
interesting.
It's like $1.82 or $1.28 billion purchase.
Wow.
I'm sort of not happy about it, only because I don't know. I've never been a big fan of Symantec. And I mean, I've been buying VeriSign's my SSL cert provider. And remember the VIP program that we've talked about extensively?
Yeah.
That's part of it. And VeriSign's whole PKI infrastructure. So PKI, VIP, and SSL, I guess that's Authenticode also, and I'm an Authenticode user, have all been sold to Symantec for a huge, 1 point something, I think it was $1.28 billion purchase. I received 2 pieces of email yesterday because I'm on VeriSign's various lists as a purchaser, as a customer of theirs. So, and it's been in the news, and I guess maybe I need to change my attitude towards Symantec. It's an old attitude back from the days of Gordon Eubanks, who was the founder. And
I like him. You didn't like Gordon?
I heard some stories about him.
Interesting.
From people who really did know him, out shooting squirrels. It's like, okay, well, that's too bad.
Interesting. Yeah, because when Gordon was originally the CEO of was not PFS. It was another great software company that I really liked, and I got to know Gordon then.
Was it Personal Software?
It wasn't. It was another. They did
because that was Fred Gibbons.
DOS. Yeah, it was Fred Gibbons. It was a DOS text editor. What was the name of his? Well, I'm sure I can Wikipedia Gordon Eubanks, but I knew him in that context, and after he went to Symantec, we kind of lost touch. But he worked at Digital Research. He was a partner with Gary Kildall, and Naval Postgraduate School. He wrote C Basic and Basic E. Let's see. Well, I guess it was Symantec. Q&A. That was it. Q&A was an integrated database and word processor with natural language query, which I loved.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yep.
It was really cool. And then he became the CEO and president of Symantec.
Yeah.
Is it Oblix?
So VeriSign has sold that off. I just wanted to let our listeners know. So just as another little security
For what it's
news
worth.
tidbit. I did want to mention in errata that my handle on Twitter didn't last out the day last week.
I noticed you changed.
Yeah, there were. I mean, it's significant when I learned about the problem with handle length for retweets. That's a problem because they take up space in the text of the tweet, and there was enough comments about, well, yeah, this is a spelling test. And I thought, okay, we don't want to give people spelling
Agile
tests.
Synapse, right.
So Agile Synapse has been replaced just by SGGRC.
Now, there is somebody named Steve Gibson on Twitter that's not you.
No, it's not. And in fact, I just saw something from him, actually, and I meant to send a note to him this morning. But I guess now that I've joined, he's just been flooded with people who think that I am him.
So you are not Steve Gibson. You are SGGRC.
He's been on Twitter for 3 years.
Yeah.
And no doubt likes his handle as it is. I'm just SG, as in Steve Gibson, and GRC, as in Gibson Research Corporation. So SGGRC, that's me. Many people did seriously ask for the plans for the portable dog killer. You wouldn't believe all of the justifications that I heard for, rats in the backyard.
Please, Steve, please. If you're not smart enough to invent it yourself, you're not smart enough to use it, my friend.
Well, that's precisely the lesson. I mean, you got me, Leo. You know me well enough. I was thinking about Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And, and the lesson being, exactly that. If you're not able to design it yourself, then you don't pass the test of being responsible enough in its use, because it really, something like that, as I demonstrated, could cause some problems.
Right.
So I think well, first of all, I don't have the plans, and I went rummaging around in war surplus plus store bins in order to get them, like the specific pieces. So I wouldn't even know how to specify it these days.
Right.
And I wanted to share the anecdote, but unfortunately, I did put on the map the fact that you could have a lot of fun with, a sonic beam weapon.
Well, give us a clue. What frequency audio does it generate?
The problem is I had a Heathkit scope that I built in Christmases before, and there was really no way. I didn't have a frequency counter. There was no way to really calibrate the sweep. My guess is that it was like in the 15 kilohertz range.
Very, very low. That's subaudible. I mean, above audible.
No, most people can hear to 20,000.
Oh, okay. Not me.
So 20,000 is about and as we get older, we do our high frequency cutoff of our ears drops lower and lower. But when like you get an audible test where they give you those tones,
you can hear it. It's almost a physical sensation.
Yeah, with 15,000, I think you can probably hear.
Yeah.
It was high, but it wasn't supersonic by any means.
It's just annoying. What is the frequency of those? I guess they don't do it anymore. But in the old days, the motion detector alarms would send out a very, very high pitched sound. You could hear.
Well, that's technically ultrasonic. That's the idea.
When I was a young man, I could tell. I could feel the sound. Oh yeah.
Well, I do remember you telling me that you had extremely high frequency hearing
in the old days.
Well, in fact, no, not even so long ago. Remember when I wrote that? I wrote the speech compressor using the Speaks codec.
Oh, yes. I did hear some differences there.
And we did the A/B testing. I could absolutely not hear any difference. And then you said, "Oh, I can hear the difference." I said, "Oh, come on." And we played a little game, and you got it every time.
There is my kids have it. You can download a ringtone or a sound for your iPhone. They call it the Teen Annoyer.
Yes, I heard, and like parents can't hear the phone ring.
So the kids use it so they can notify each other in class. The teacher won't hear it, but the kids will hear it.
I love it.
Yeah, see, this is kind of along the same lines.
That's very much.
And Henry
so.
uses it, and we actually did it during a twit when we had a live audience some years ago, and Dvorak and I are sitting here, blithely playing the tone, and the younger people in the audience are going, make it stop. So they really can hear it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They say mostly people under 25.
I love it. That's great. Yeah.
So that's a kind of a sonic
audio. Well, it's an audio filter. It's sort of a sonic firewall.
Yeah.
Because we can't hear it.
Isn't
the
that
old
interesting?
Folks can't hear it, but the young kids still can. That's neat.
I'm trying to find the spec for that tone, but I'm thinking it's around 15 kilohertz.
One of our listeners who listened to episode 248 last week sent me the URL of San Mateo Electronics, sure as hell, on 42nd Avenue. And I thought, oh my God. So it's smelectronics.com. And I clicked the link. Actually, I typed it in myself, because you know about me and links. And put it in my browser. Up it came, 42nd Avenue Electronics. And on the home page, it says, since 1961. And I'm thinking, well, they'd been there 10 years before the portable dog killer was built using the mini box.
So you found it. Now, I have to say that you did not hear it, nor did I, but I played a 15 kilohertz tone moments ago, and the chat room is going, ow.
No, kid, do it again.
And by the way, if you're listening to the MP3, you probably won't hear it.
I'll bet it can't get through.
It's probably Skype. It's not.
Yeah,
but I can't. I'm in the studio and I can't hear it.
Wow.
But on the other hand, it did. But people on the stream can hear it, which is interesting. Flash. Listen. Nothing. They hate it. Now I'm gonna play. Let's play something. Let's play 10 kilohertz. You can hear that. Can you hear that?
No.
Skype's rolling it off then.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
Yeah, Skype's rolling that off. We're doing a little hearing test. All right, kids. 20 kilohertz. The chat room's going crazy. Now, and I did it I have to say, I did it as a blind test because I did not say I'm going to play the 15 kilohertz tone.
Right.
And
they really did hear it.
They really heard it. It's very interesting, isn't it?
Where are you getting these different frequencies?
This is noiseaddicts.com. And it's called a blog post called...
I'm sorry that I asked. I'm sorry that you said.
It's the online music and audio magazine, and there is a blog post, you'll have to go back a year. Can you hear this? And he ranges from 8 to 22 kilohertz. Little waves. And actually a very interesting idea.
So 15, so you can imagine if that 15, you can't hear it.
I can't hear it.
I think it might, maybe the portable doll killer was down at 10 then. Because, I mean, it was, adults could hear it. Mr. Archibald had no problem hearing it from across the quad. So.
And, probably, I don't know what MP3 rolls off, but MP3 is a very interesting codec. That it doesn't necessarily roll off frequencies, but it does some interesting things, and it's
using psychoacoustic science in order to understand what it is that we do hear and don't hear in complex waveforms, and it gets rid of the complexity that doesn't matter.
And the chat room is just going crazy. They are hearing it. They say their dogs are barking. Oh my God, I have a headache. I don't know how much of that is facetious and how much of that is real, but I will no longer play anything. And it may be that we don't know what I don't know what the flash media encoder is doing to it. So it may be because if you're watching at home, you're watching on a.
Well, now you made me curious, so I'll have to go over there and listen to it myself.
We have to call this episode the Portable Listener Killer.
So I did get a neat note from a Security Now listener, Mark Gottslig. His note was, Spinrite saved my Ubuntu, which is not something I've heard often. He's in Calgary, Canada. He said, hello, Steve. I've been a Spinrite owner for several years now, ever since I heard about it on Security Now. I've used it in its maintenance mode the whole time, running it, or not full-time, but never other than maintenance mode, running it monthly on my own PC and running it on friends and family machines when they have me do an upgrade or repair for them, and have gotten several of them to buy copies for themselves after much praise. And hey, Mark, I've got no problem with that, as our listeners know. Thank you. However, that is to say, I have no problem with him running it on other people's machines, encouraging them to buy their own copy. However, I've never had a need to use it in recovery mode until yesterday. I've recently installed the newest Ubuntu release 10.04, and have spent the last week off and on configuring and learning this new OS I've only had a fleeting need for previously. I ended up having a lockup and had to force a reboot with the power button on the laptop. And he said, I didn't know about Alt-Sys Request RUSB. I suppose you do, Leo, but I don't know what that is, but some keystroke invocation, apparently.
Yeah, no.
And he said, when it rebooted, I got an error message and a command prompt. Not knowing what happened, I tried a couple of different things to no avail. I figured before I try anything more serious, I'd give Spinrite a whirl. I booted my Spinrite CD and started to watch some TV with the laptop propped on the couch behind me. Beside me, he says. I was very surprised to see the Dynastat screen appear after 30 minutes or so. That's Spinrite's dynamic statistics technology, which it drops into when it needs to do sector-level repair. And so he said, and watched excitedly to see Spinrite do something I'd never seen before. Then he says, I love it. This novelty wore off quickly. So I left the computer to work away at the drive overnight. I checked this morning, and Spinrite had completed. I did a quick reboot before work and was shown the Ubuntu login screen that I had been trying to get for several hours the previous day. Thank you so much for such a great product. Spinrite saved my Ubuntu. So thank you.
And that's an important point. The Spinrite is not operating at the file system level. It doesn't know from operating systems or file systems.
So runs on Linux just fine.
Yeah, because it's looking at the sectors on the hard drive.
Precisely.
It does have to run on a BIOS-based machine, though, because you use BIOS calls, which means EFI booting machines like the Macintoshes, it does not work with.
Not today.
Is somebody, you mentioned at one point somebody was looking at a way to do that.
I've heard people anecdotally say they've succeeded, and I've even had them take screenshots. I mean, I've seen photos of Spinrite running on Macs.
Really?
Because apparently there is a way of getting Mac to support a BIOS as part of its boot camp procedure, but I've never pursued it myself.
Right, right. And somebody's asking in the chat room if Spinrite can be put on a USB drive with a bootloader. Could you boot it, in other words? And that would be if your BIOS boots from USB.
It will. And
absolutely.
People, I mean, I have it on my own USB key that I carry around with me. I've mentioned before. Yeah, Spinrite often, there is a, in fact, I've read a story a couple times where someone had a USB flash drive that was too large for his BIOS to recognize, but he used a smaller one, which the BIOS did recognize, and it just booted and ran Spinrite fine. We
should point out, though, that, and this is a different thing, that checking a USB drive with Spinrite is going to give you limited results.
Oh, no. You don't want to do that.
Because the USB hides the interface.
Well, and there's, I mean, Spinrite's really oriented toward physical magnetic media.
No, but I mean, a spinning USB, you're right. Obviously, a flash drive don't do it.
A USB connected
A USB connected hard drive.
Yes. Well, we do have success stories with it. I'm not as bullish about it because, as you say, Leo, the USB interface only does reads and writes, and Spinrite is able to do a much better job if it's has physical low-level access to the drive. That's far superior. But
right.
People say, I mean, as a last resort, Spinrite can still work.
Worst case, you'd take out. I mean, if it didn't work, take it out of the USB enclosure. It's still a SATA or a IDE drive, and then put it on a PC, then Spinrite it.
Yes, and I have had people successfully do that with their Macintosh. They've taken the drive as a last resort out of their Mac over to a PC motherboard and run it there, and Spinrite will fix the drive that way.
And even iPod drives, I've been told.
Remember, yes, we had a lot of people. There was one guy that we read who had a large collection of iPods because he became the iPod dumping ground for all of his friends.
Right.
And then he realized, hey, Spinrite fixes these. And he fixed a whole bunch of them and gave them back their music that was at that point.
You got to get the interface and all that. Yep. Hey, I don't want to put you out of business, but some of this wouldn't be necessary if people would just back up their freaking computers. And that's where Carbonite comes in. We talk about Carbonite all the time. They're a great product for people who, I'm going to put it on Abby's laptop. She's about to go to college in August, and she'll have a laptop. I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. I'll just go put Carbonite on it. And what happens is when Carbonite can get online, and even if it's on a Wi-Fi network or whatever, when you're online, as long as you're not using the, you don't need all the bandwidth or your computer is idle, it will back up stuff automatically in the background, all your personal files on your hard drive, unlimited amount of what's on your hard drive for less than $5 a month. So, I mean, and it doesn't even need to know I'm backing her up, but if she should lose the drive, lose the laptop, or need a file that she accidentally deletes, I say, well, Abby, guess what? Log into Carbonite. There's your file. It's always available. AES 256-bit encryption to protect your privacy. You control the key. It also does SSL if you are sending through if you are on one of those Wi-Fi access hotspots in the campus, cafeteria or the coffee shop, it's still secure as it's going up. I can just go on. Carbonite is a great solution. I want you to try it. No credit card needed for the next 15 days, Mac or PC. If you go to Carbonite.com and use the offer code SecurityNow, SecurityNow. You don't need a credit card, just SecurityNow. And you could try it. See how it backs up. See what it's doing. If you decide to buy and you use the coupon code SecurityNow, you'll get 2 months free. But you have to do the trial first. I think Carbonite is such a boon, not just for laptop users, but for anybody who doesn't want to think about backup but wants to make sure that data is protected. It does it automatically in the background, securely, at a very affordable price. Less than $55 a year for unlimited backup from your internal drive. Carbonite.com, the offer code SecurityNow. Give it a try. Steve, I have questions. We're an hour into this. You want to do a few anyway?
Absolutely.
Why not? Let me pull up the questions here. We'll get to as many as we can before well, we got 40 minutes.
Yeah, we do.
Nobody's ever complained about the show being too long.
No.
You can always pause it. That's the beauty of it. It's Paul Stubb in Nashville, Tennessee, wrote about the portable dog killer, your episode last.
And let me just briefly interrupt and say I got a ton of email from our listeners. I really thank them. Clearly the episode was the most popular one we've ever done. I actually had people rating it. So someone thought the vitamin D episode was number 1. This one was number 2.
Somebody who's not into security, obviously.
Thought it was the other way around. So I just chose one of so many notes because, as our listeners are about to see, this achieved my dream for one of the main reasons I wanted to share that last week.
Excellent. So Paul writes, just wanted to add my voice to the likely thousands of people emailing you about the latest Security Now. It was absolutely wonderful. My wife, God bless her, usually hates Security Now for reasons I'll never understand. I might have an idea, but but she absolutely loved this episode. I had it on the background Saturday morning. It was a little Garrison Keillor-ish, wasn't it?
It was so good.
In fact, she thought so highly of it that she made our 8-year-old son listen to it. He's a typical 8-year-old who loves to play video games, and like most kids his age, he plays them way too often. But after listening to the show, he went right into our garage and started disassembling some of his old broken electronic toys. He wanted to see how the components fit together, and I'm pretty sure he had grand ideas about making his own sonic blaster. Anyway, thank you for the wonderful episode, and please give us more like it. Wow, that's great, Steve. That's really great.
Yeah, the next question feeds into this, and something that I wanted you to contribute to, Leo.
Great.
So, I want to thank everybody for writing. I appreciate that they appreciated the episode. I felt like I was taking a little bit of a risk going so far off topic, but I think it worked. So
yeah, we do a lot of security information. We did even on that show, and I think it's good to talk about your life experience because you've got some. Mike York in Seattle, Washington, writes about our mention of FIRST Robotics in episode 248. I mentioned the FIRST USA robotics competition. Thanks for the mention of FIRST. I've been involved for 7 years serving as a team mentor, a judge, and a referee. Hey, it does make a difference. A significant difference. We've seen phenomenal growth of FIRST FRC teams here in Washington State the last few years and expect it to continue as more businesses see the value of FIRST and provide resources for teams, scholarships, and competitions. As a referee at the Seattle Regional this year, I had the best seat in the house to see, hear, and smell the robotics competition. It's encouraging to see the excitement in these scientists and engineers of the future. Keep the good work up and great podcast. While Security Now may not be an appropriate podcast for a segment on FIRST, it may be a good subject for one of Leo's other endeavors. Yeah, I think I want to do a FIRST show. If you go to usfirst.org, you can read about the FIRST Robotic Competition, FRC. And there are different programs for all ages. And the high school team, which is, of course, kind of the varsity league of FIRST, is what I think I'm going to do. And they say it's about $6,000. That includes all the gear and so forth. So I want to fund this FIRST team in my kids' high school, and then I want to do a show. I have to get waivers from all the parents and everything because I would like to do a kind of a reality show, following them week after week as they design and build these robots.
Well, I love the notion of a robot because I do think there's a little something lost in a software-only solution. I mean, we talked about programming, and programming's interesting. The reason video games are compelling is that they have at least some real-world tie-in. But what's beautiful about a robot is that it merges the physical world, I mean, some sort of battery and motor, and also the computerized controller and software world together. And so you can have relatively simple hardware that doesn't have to be powerful and exotic. Just, a couple motors mounted on a platform with wheels, and then you give it the brains in software. So but you get something physical, something tangible.
Right.
It's like these lights that are blinking behind me.
People love those lights. Do you want to explain those briefly so people?
Well, I was just going to say that they're machines, they're PDP-8 computer emulations, but they exist physically. It would have been far easier to have just an emulator on the screen that looks like those, but those things actually exist. They've got switches and buttons and lights and knobs, and I mean the tangibility of it really makes a difference. The fact that it exists physically, and so I just this idea of messing with a robot, because this just isn't expensive any longer. A couple motors, and I mean there's lots of resources on the web. These little controllers like the PIC chips are only a few dollars now. There's even Lego that if you want to back away and not even get your hands very dirty, there's like Lego robotics kits where you get to stick this thing together and then again do the programming in a simplified programming language. But again, do something. If you can break that inertia. Also, I'm trying to think what it was in the past. There's something that I talked about that a lot of people wrote back sort of like, oh, I'm going to go do that with my son. That'd be a perfect thing to do with my son. And I don't remember now what it was, but that's another idea.
Or daughter. Or daughter,
yes. There's a problem, I think, just cross-generational, the 8-year-old wants to play video games, but boy, if he wanted to like build something with his dad or dad and daughter, and actually I did get some mail from dads who had daughters who were listening to 248.
Good.
And who wanted to engage them in this way. So again, I think that the robot connection, there's a hook there, because you don't have to build something really fancy. Even some basic mechanics that you then give a brain to with programming, and then you get that real world thing. It's like, oh, look, it's actually moving on the floor.
Right. Lego Mindstorms are great. In fact, there is a Lego Mindstorms robotics first competition, and I know that our high school participated, did very well. So that's a very easy one. And they're suggesting in the chat room, and I absolutely should mention Arduino, which is a really interesting open source electronics prototyping platform that includes a processor, has its own programming language. People are building all sorts of interesting things from Arduino. We did an interview with the Arduino, one of the Arduino designers on Floss Weekly, and I encourage you to listen to that, or go to Arduino, ARDUINO.cc. This is another great way you can get started with kits and robotics, and it's really, really cool. So I think there's more stuff out there than ever before, really. I mean, we had Heathkit when we were kids, but there's a lot of cool kind of hardware, software things out there right now.
Yes, and all I'm suggesting is break the inertia.
Yes.
Do something.
Do something.
It's all out there, but don't let it stay out there. Bring it inside.
Right. Question 3 from listener Matt. He says, please, sir, can I have some more? Episode 248 was fantastic. Oh, and you're right about Control-C, the, copy-paste bug. It's been like that for a few years, so much so that it's second nature for me to always now press Control-C. And that always works, but it's a pain in MS Office because it brings up a multiple paste toolbar. So everybody's responding to this. I mean, apparently it's something people are really having happen.
Yes, I wanted to drop this in from Matt mostly as a placeholder and reminder. Many of our listeners have responded that they were so happy to hear this brought up.
Not just you.
They've been thinking it was just them for a long time. And one person wrote a lengthy piece of email where he's convinced this happened at Service Pack 3.
Oh, interesting. Of XP.
Of XPs, and it's in Vista and 7, that Microsoft did deliberately in their security enhancements for Service Pack 3, they changed the way the keyboard hooking technology works in order to thwart some behavior of keystroke logging, and that it's his belief, and this is not confirmed, but I just wanted to share it, that was the boundary, that Service Pack 2 works fine, reliably, and that it got broken somehow subtly when Microsoft went to Service Pack 3 and beyond, that was the boundary, and it had something to do with the way Microsoft increased the security in order to thwart keystroke logging. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but I thought that was an interesting thought, and I know that Paul and Microsoft are pursuing this. So if you think of it when you talk to Paul again, say,
I will ask him. Yeah,
have them take a look at that.
They are, apparently. I don't know what's going on with that. Jason in question 5. Jason in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, wonders and worries about magic packets. Hi, Steve. I was troubleshooting my network adapter, and I came across a network setting in Windows 7 I've never seen before. The checkbox said, allow a magic packet to wake the computer? Ooh. Should I be worried about the magic packet? Is it some strange secret Microsoft backdoor we don't know about? I did a bit of reading on the magic packet, and now I have a bit of understanding of it. But I'd appreciate a Gibson explanation if possible. Thanks for the great netcast. You and Leo are doing a great service for the security community.
Something we've never talked about.
I never heard of.
The Wake on LAN.
Oh, I have seen that even in BIOS settings.
Yes, and in fact, that's where it has to be. In some cases, you can put it on your network adapter because it'll then write it into the firmware of the network adapter. Typically, it's a BIOS setting. Wake on LAN is a really interesting technology that allows you to essentially have your computer turned off, completely off. On the other hand, many people have probably noticed that our computers are never completely off any longer. And it's a little distressing the first time you notice, for example, that with your computer off, there's still like a little light on the motherboard that's on, and that like the network adapter, if your network connector has little LED monitors, they'll still be flickering. It's like, wait a minute, if my computer's off, how is this stuff on? Well, the LAN adapter is still powered up, specifically for the purpose of allowing your computer, if it's enabled, to be powered up upon receipt of a so-called magic packet. What's magic about it is the payload that a LAN broadcast packet carries. We've talked about MAC addressing several times, even in this hour. The MAC address is the Ethernet, the 48-bit Ethernet address of the packet on the network. But in several instances, it's necessary for a adapter on the network to be able to call to everyone. For example, ARP protocol uses that. When a computer is coming on the LAN for the first time, it says it sends out a broadcast asking for it knows the IP, for example, of the gateway, but it needs to get the MAC address of the gateway. So it'll send an ARP broadcast that is addressed to the broadcast address of the on the LAN, which is heard by every NIC, every network interface card on the LAN. What happens is the so-called magic packet is any broadcast packet where somewhere in the payload, somewhere in the data payload of the packet, there are 6 bytes worth of all ones. That is to say, FF, 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 FF. 6 bytes of all ones, followed by 16 repetitions of the MAC address of the NIC whose computer you want to wake up. So the idea is if some device on the network wanted to wake up a given computer, the computer is off. And remember that there isn't an IP protocol on an Ethernet. There's only the MAC address. So you have to, in advance, you need to know the MAC address of the computer you want to wake up. because it's not until the whole TCP/IP stack exists that it has an IP address, and that's defined in the software. What we need is something which is defined in the hardware while the computer's, independent of operating system, completely turned off. Well, that's the MAC address. So if you know that in advance, you just put a packet onto the LAN sent to all of the adapters on the network containing the special 6 bytes of ones followed by 16 repetitions of the 48-bit MAC address. If it's been enabled in the BIOS and or the adapter, and that machine has the ability to be awakened by such a packet, the adapter will see that, scan for that string, see that it matches its own MAC address, and wiggle a little line on its interface to the power supply, turning the computer on.
That's quite clever, actually.
It's very neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And completely harmless.
Completely harmless. Nothing to worry about. The magic isn't dark magic or black magic or evil magic. It's good magic.
It's clever.
But if you, I would say, if it's not something you're actively using, turn it off.
Oh yeah, I turn it off. Yeah.
Standard. I do too, because that's not something I need. So if you see it, disable it unless you know you need it. As is standard computer, security advice. Turn off what you don't know you actively need.
Sometimes people call me on the show saying my computer wakes up in the middle of the night. And there's a lot of reasons it could do that. But I wonder if sometimes, do you think it could be possible that a stray packet could somehow do this?
Well, this isn't transmittable unless your router is specifically configured. It's not something that would
not routable.
Right. It's because it only works within your local LAN, not WAN in a wide area network setting. There are routers that can be configured to send out wake on LAN packets. I would guess that their computer's in standby, and something like Microsoft Security has awakened it in order to update itself.
Or a cat moved the mouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's usually what I tell them. First thing I ask them, do you have a cat? Question 6 comes from Vegard in Norway. He asks, or Wegard asks about hosted versus self-hosted blogs. So apparently, I didn't know this, but you've started a blog. You mentioned you were going to.
Well,
and he wants to know why you're using WordPress.com and not hosting it yourself with WordPress.
Yeah, I think I did mention that I was going to, and I do plan to.
Oh, you haven't done it yet, though?
Correct.
Okay.
My concern is a couple things. I did look at what it would take to host my own WordPress blog, and unfortunately, the first thing you need to do is install SQL Server.
Or no, MySQL.
I don't care. Yes, it's the last thing I would ever allow into GRC's network.
Yeah, because MySQL has all sorts of injection attacks.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I would love to host my own, but I thought about it. I have Unix servers. That's where my news groups are hosted, for example. So, FreeBSD is the Unix that I had chosen years ago. It's been good to me. So I could do that, but it's like, okay, wait a minute. What kind of a rat hole am I going to go down?
Yeah.
And what value am I really going to add? And, then it's backing it up. Then it's, blah, 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 and so forth. And I just thought, makes much more sense, even though I'm gonna have less control. It looks to me like WordPress.com is doing a good job. And so I wanted to bring this up because it's an interesting question that I can imagine many people would ask themselves is, do I do this myself? Or do I use a third-party hosting provider? And for me, much as I'm able to, it would take more time than I expect, because everything I do does, which would delay everything else that I really need to be getting on with, like finally getting going on CryptoLink, but I got to get the other things finished first. And why? So I have it running on my own server. Big deal. I did look at WordPress, and it does allow me to alias my own domain to theirs. So it will be...
It won't be obvious where it's hosted at all.
It will be... Well, you're correct. And for ease of use, it'll be somewhere at grc.com. So I get the benefit of using my own domain as the anchor for it, yet all the other mess is theirs, and there just isn't enough value that I could provide by doing it myself. So that was the decision I made, and not an easy one, but I'm sure the right one.
I'm not sure I would recommend WordPress.com. I'm nothing against it, although they will put they'll put ads into your stuff.
Oh,
yeah, and there's probably arbitrary JavaScript code also. You might want to look at Squarespace.com, which is a similar hosted solution, but it's a paid solution. WordPress.com is free.
Can you pay WordPress?
Oh, you might. Yeah, I'm sure you can.
Okay.
And it may be that they then turn off the ads and so forth. But Squarespace is a great solution too. So and a sponsor of the network. So I just want to mention Squarespace.com. I think they're very easy to set up. They run on a Java. They're basically Java based, and they run a VPS system. So it scales really well. It's cheap, and they do a good job. And they can do the same, aliasing with a CNAME and all of that stuff.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm moving my blog over there, and we do our in-house Twit blog there, Inside Twits on Squarespace. Cool. Question 7, Richard Doyle in Sydney, Australia, stumbled upon your legacy project. I don't know what that is. Dear Steve, I'm 32 and I've only been listening to Security Now for a few months, but I'm quickly catching up. Your explanation over the last several weeks of the fundamentals of computer architecture, organization, design, and evolution over time has been accessible enough to inspire me to genuinely want to learn more and more about this entire area myself from very first principles. Have you ever thought of writing and publishing a book encompassing in greater detail everything you've explained and would like to explain in the current Security Now series on the fundamentals of computing? Every other resource out there, mostly books, are dry, boring, and many assume a level of knowledge that most people just don't have. And for the most part, every other resource out there is techie from the start. Not a bad thing, but we are badly in need of something that can begin to explain a thing in an extremely simple way, then scale up in plain language to the relevant level of detail. Other authors seem to enjoy an abundance of technical jargon for its own sake, and the people you've inspired through your current series on Security Now are left with no entry point into this wonderful and amazing field. Please consider Steve... blah, 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 blah. How a computer works. It's just the substance is there. Kindest regards, Richard. I don't have a Twitter account. There is my good friend wrote and has kept up to date a wonderful book called How Computers Work. I think you probably know him. I'm trying to remember his name. He's been doing it for years. See if I can find it on Amazon, and it's beautiful. It's Ron White. He's been doing it for years.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
you know Ron, right?
Yeah.
This is kind of the definitive book on this, and it's done with great illustrations. It may not be as technical. It's not as technical, in fact, as what you're talking about, Steve. But it is definitely aimed at the non-technical, and it's a good start if you're looking for that kind of thing. Incredible illustrations. But Ron is a smart guy. I mean, the detail in here is fantastic, and he has kept it up to date, which I really admire. So I think this would be a good start.
I agree, and it's available today.
Right. Would you like to do a book?
Well, no.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
But I've wondered this is going to sound strange. I'm 55 and still have a lot of life left in me. But I've wondered what I'm going to do when I'm 75. That is,
a good question.
And because I really do believe that if you retire and sit on the patio in a rocking chair, you expire not long afterwards.
It seems to be the case in many cases.
And we know that I spent a chunk of time in the last year sort of looking at antique machines. I built the PDP-8s, and I also spent a lot of time researching instruction sets. I looked at field programmable gate arrays, which I referred to last week as being these fantastic, electronic building blocks which could be used for defining hardware out of software. And, for example, one of the things that people are doing is they're implementing processor instruction sets in field programmable gate arrays, FPGAs. And, like taking classic instruction sets and creating computers out of these field programmable gate arrays. There's something called opencores.com or .org, opencores.org, which has a lot of these. And so I thought about that. And I also thought about these antique machines, the PDP-8 and PDP-11s that I have. The problem is they're not interfaced to any contemporary peripherals. I mean, you have to have a teletype or, maybe a serial interface, but, what are you really going to do with them? And so I sort of everything was sort of in a big mashup. And then I looked at instruction sets, and I sort of like surveyed the evolution of instruction sets over time. And all of this sort of ended up giving me the incentive to do this fundamentals of computer series that we've embarked on. And for a while I was thinking, I'm thinking that the PDP-11 was the right instruction set, sort of like something that would be fun to program. And then I thought maybe the VAX. There was one instruction set from a company called National Semiconductor. They had the NS32000 series, which unfortunately never got off the ground, but in many ways, I think it's the best instruction set ever designed. It was fun. It was fun and nice to program. 8 general purpose registers, a very regular instruction set, just beautiful. And then I thought, okay, I'd like to program that instruction set, but the chips don't exist anymore. So then for a while I was thinking, okay, I could write the software to put this chip into an FPGA, a field programmable gate array, basically create this chip no longer exists out of contemporary silicon. The problem is that when I thought about, okay, what kind of performance would I get? Well, the things that have been done by like Intel and AMD to squeeze performance out of current processors are just over the top. I mean, it's unbelievable, the technology that is in these things with multiple parallel execution paths and multi-cores and pipelining and even optimization of instruction sequences and branch prediction where it guesses based on local knowledge what path your code is going to take, and it's just daunting. So I realized that if I were to create this idealized processor that would start off probably as the instructions the National Semiconductor designed 5 years after DEX VAX, by the way. So they had 5 years of experience with the VAX instruction set and sort of tweaked it a little bit to make it better. I might do the same, tweak it some more. The idea would be to create this ideal instruction set. But if I put it into hardware, it would never perform like a contemporary machine because there's no way I'm going to invest the unbelievable resources that an Intel or an AMD has. And then it hit me that if I emulated that instruction set, this ideal instruction set, in a contemporary processor like the current Intel, the current Intel architecture, then I would in machine language, I would emulate another machine, sort of like Pascal, and we've talked about P code, like a pseudo machine, but because I was writing the emulator in machine language, and because I was writing it for hardware, the Intel architecture, which is already so unbelievably powerful, I would end up with an amazing amount of performance of this, like the most beautiful instruction set I've ever seen, that there is, in my opinion. And so then I thought, okay, that's what I would want to write my operating system in. And that's what I would want to create an environment in. And so my plan for retirement, my legacy, is to essentially create an entire open source, free environment around the most ideal, beautiful instruction set that we've ever had, and write an entire world, a computing world in that, meaning assembler, editor, operating system environment, with the goal of teaching the low-level operation of all of this stuff. Because it's hosted on contemporary hardware, everyone gets to play with it for free, and because it's a virtual machine, it gets to live forever. All anyone would have to do to port it into the future is write that little interpreter for the instruction set, and then everything else is available. So at this point, 20 years before I'm ready to start, that's what I think I'm going to do.
That's exciting. I look forward to it. I thought so. You got a few projects actually for when you retire. I think you're going to be very busy in your 70s.
I want to be busy in my 70s. I want to be sure I don't just sit around and decay. So you and I will be doing the podcast, episode 3,927.
Exactly.
Actually, more than that. Well, anyway.
So one of the reasons I like my business is because there's a long tradition of people in their 70s and even older. Look at Paul Harvey, still working.
Yep.
Especially radio, because your body can fall apart, but you can still sound good.
How old is Jerry Pornell, by the way?
Jerry's in his 70s. Jerry's going strong. He's writing his column and Chaos Manor, and I mean, I love Jerry. So you're right. You can keep going.
Yep.
I plan to. And if you got to keep it smart up here, but you also got, and I know you're doing both. You got to keep the body in shape. And
yep.
Larry King, how old is he? He's in his 70s, right?
Yeah. Bad example though.
If I'm in my 70s and on my 8th wife, I'm going to figure.
Good point. There's something
going on. An anonymous listener suggests, let's design a network. I really enjoy your program, and especially am impressed by how you take the time to explain the fundamental technology to give your listeners a deeper understanding of the weekly topics you cover in your Q&A and your regular episodes. If I may make an episode suggestion, it might be worthwhile completing the Let's Design a Computer series with 1 or 2 episodes on networks and the internet. Oh, I agree. You talk about how networks work from time to time, but never as comprehensively as you do with computer systems. Considering the network-based nature of most exploits these days, I would greatly enjoy 1 or 2 episodes dedicating to a comprehensive explanation of how networks work and the internet. I could think of no better person for this task. Thanks for the great program. I'd like to add my vote to that.
We're going to do that.
Yeah.
We listeners who've been listening for almost 5 years will know that we did some of that in the beginning, but it was 5 years ago. And I know that there's been a churn of listeners. We've got listeners who have not been with us since the beginning. And this is such a fundamental core domain of technology, exactly as this anonymous listener suggests, that I think he's right. So we have a bunch of other things sort of already in the queue, things like my analysis of LastPass and so forth, some things I've already got planned I want to get through. But probably around the time we start in on year 6, I think that that going back over and taking our time, starting at the fundamental basics of packets and routing and network and the internet would be another great series. So we're adding that to the queue.
Yeah. And really, you can start at fundamentals on that even. And I think that there's a lot to be understood. And frankly, nowadays, it was the old Sun Microsystems slogan, the network is the computer. Nowadays, really, a computer without a network is not a significant device. It's the network that...
Fundamental.
Yeah, really is fundamental to the overall operation. Question 9, Ashley Black in Reading, Berkshire, England, brings us the wonderful glitch of the week. Subject, Skyhook. Hello, Steve. I just listened to the podcast where you described the Skyhook Wi-Fi location finding system, and it totally explained a strange bug I'd been having with my iPhone. When using the Maps application on my iPhone, I'll go into normal mode here.
Although I really did like that.
Did you enjoy
It's amazing what a difference that...
It sounds so much more cultured and intelligent.
It does.
I have British friends, and they all sound so literate. When using the Maps application on my iPhone, the reason I stopped doing it is because the British people are howling in pain.
Yes. It's like, oh my goodness.
Just like when we see a British actor, sometimes, not Hugh Laurie is an example of somebody who
I was just going to say, it's amazing when you see him interviewed separately when he's not doing
good actor can do a good accent, but I am not that. When using the Maps application on my iPhone at work, it kept showing my location as the old address of the company. That's interesting.
Oh, again, listen to this carefully. This is a wonderful glitch.
We moved to a new place 3 months ago, and this was very confusing because it was 5 miles from the new location where I am now. Then the iPhone got GPS, and the signal came in, and the location be accurate. But for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why it would think I was at the old office. Obviously, the answer now is obvious. The wireless access points we used in the old office are now in the new office, but Skyhook's database still has the old location. I wonder how long they take to update their database, or does iPhone Skyhook API do it for them? Thanks, longtime listener and Spinrite faithful Ashley Black. That's really, of course, that would happen.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
We talked about how the SSID and the MAC address of the hotspot, the access point, was once located by Skyhook trucks driving around, and so the database knows the physical location of those access points. Well, the company moved months ago. The access points are now 5 miles away from where they were, but Skyhook has not updated its database. So for anyone near those access points, any technology, probably Google Street Maps, I would imagine, is going to be the same way. Street View technology, anything that once roamed around the streets, logging the locations of those access points, the device sees the access point, says, "Where am I?" And the database says, "Well, you're where you were 5 months ago." So anyway, I thought that was just very cool. And he asked a question that was the first thing that occurred to me, which is, if the phone got access to GPS, so it knew exactly where it was, wouldn't it make sense that it
should send it back?
Yes.
Yeah.
That it could say, "Whoops, wait a minute here. This is more than a small error." So, I don't know, maybe you want to put it in pending somehow, or say, well, maybe it's time to roll around this area again. I don't know, how they handle it, but it absolutely makes sense that GPS-enabled equipment, which is also Wi-Fi enabled, could be essentially doing the equivalent of what rolling trucks around are doing, but doing it on the fly dynamically, which, wow, that'd be really cool too.
I think there's privacy considerations that keep the iPhone from updating the Skyhook database. I would guess, right? It's the kind of thing that I can just see the headline. iPhone tells, company where you are.
Yep.
Without your permission. So, yep. I mean, if they popped up a thing that said, "Can we update Skyhook?" or something, maybe. But that's an I'd be very surprised if it did, just for that reason alone.
Yeah, you're right. So, for example, it could know that Skyhook and the GPS in the phone are disagreeing substantially. Pop up notice saying, "Hi, our geolocation data from Wi-Fi no longer matches GPS.
Right.
Would you mind if we update this? Our database in the sky.
Right.
Skynet wants to know about Skyhook." And so it's like, no. I like you not knowing where I am.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people are very worried about that. Google this week announced an API for its latitude. If you use Google devices, I don't think it works on the. Yeah, I guess it does work on the iPhone. It knows where you are and sends that information back to Latitude in real time. It's not even like a check-in. It's like as you move. And there's an API for that now. And I think that there are 3 million users, and I bet you many of them don't remember signing up and allowing it. So this has become, you're going to see a lot more about location stuff. This is just the beginning of real paranoia over that. Steve, we've come to the end of our great 9 questions.
Yes, and a great episode. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Number 250 next week.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And, you scared me. You said as we start our 5th year, but that's like 3 weeks off.
That's 260.
260. It's not far.
Not far.
Amazing.
Yep.
Amazing. If you want to know more, grc.com, the Gibson Research Corporation, grc.com/security now. You can get 16 kilobit versions of the show notes, full audio quality, transcripts, all the information. Steve puts it up there as pro bono. Really appreciate you doing that, Steve. He also has a lot of great other things at grc.com. Spinrite, the world's finest hard drive and maintenance utility. A lot of free utilities. grc.com. Steve's Twitter handle, we must not hesitate to tell. And you got to start following some people, Steve. You're still only following 2 people.
I'm just nervous about so much stuff coming in. I'm actually reading everything that comes in from my own listener.
If you read the ad stuff, that's pretty good too. Yeah. And if you see somebody who is really consistently giving you good information, follow them. Anyway, follow Steve, twitter.com/SGGRC. That's easy. Steve Gibson GRC. SGGRC is his Twitter handle. Steve, we'll see you next week on Security Now.
I did want to make a mention that since we're recording this a day late, this collides with Elaine's own transcribing schedule. The block that she normally allocates, you're not able to fill. So transcripts may not appear, for example, until next Monday. But don't worry if you don't see them. I will get them up as soon as Elaine is able to do them for us.
Yeah, I should mention that we normally do this show, and you're invited to watch us do it live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 1800 UTC. It's at live.twit.tv. We do make the video available on iTunes and everywhere else podcasts are available. Probably the easiest way to find it and subscribe is to go to the Twit page, twit.tv/SN. twit.tv/SN. You'll see subscribe drop-downs for audio and video. Makes it very easy to add us to Google, Zoom, iTunes, and everywhere else. Thanks, Steve. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Leo.
Security Now.